Well, how are things looking on the weather forecasts for South America here as we head towards the end of the year? A lot of eyes are on Brazil, of course, right now, and the rainfall pattern. Also, what about the U.S.? We're going to see a white Christmas. We're going to talk about those things and more here today as we are joined by Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist with Nutrient Ag Solutions. Eric, good to catch up with you again. Merry Christmas to you and yours. Let's talk a little bit about what we are seeing in South America. I think we need to start there. I know it was fairly hot and dry over this past weekend, but as we're flipping that calendar or getting ready to flip that calendar towards January, working through Christmas, talk about what you're seeing with the latest weather models in Brazil and Argentina.
Yeah, so Argentina saw some pretty nasty weather over the weekend. There was an outbreak of some pretty severe storms that rolled through parts of central Argentina, putting down heavy rainfall, massive hail, some straight line wind damage. But the reality of it is that unlike the last 2 years, Argentina has got rain this spring. And remember, their planting season's very long, and so here they are looking at all of this decent spring rainfall, and it's going to help Argentina not do what they did a year ago, which was to end up with about half of their normal crop. So there's a lot of just discussion. How do we balance that out with the fact that north central and kind of the center west region in Brazil has been so very dry? You look over the last 2 to 3 months, we're talking about very, very dry conditions. I've actually made a graph last week that showed that October, November combined were the second driest since 1940, with only 1942 as the drier year for October and November. And then, of course, December has started off dry as well. But what matters, I mean, it's not to say this doesn't matter because it got really hot, but if rains come back at the end of this month and it rains in January, then a lot of those problems can be undone for some of the replanted crop or the later planted soybeans. And so we've watched the models trend away from what they'd been doing for the last 2 weeks, which was to go very, very dry. European model said, we're just going to leave one small corner of Mato Grosso, Tocantins, and Para dry, and the rest of it's going to see closer to normal rains. And even the GFS, which paints a much bigger section of Mato Grosso dry, it's calling for precipitation chances to be off by about 2 inches. Well, when normal is 4 inches, if you get storms that roll through, I mean, you might get enough. So it's a bit of a wild card, and we've not seen market reaction like anyone would expect, given the stats I just gave you, like the second driest since 1940. And so we're watching it carefully, but I'll say this: the models, all of them, trended a bit wetter over the weekend. So the question is, will it actually manifest itself in some sort of meaningful rains to stop the bleeding for the crop there? We could see a pretty terrible, I say terrible, meaning not in the most favorable direction for a lot of U.S. farmers, reaction in the markets if the rains do come in. What is true, though, we cannot ignore this, is that the crop has been compromised and the crop calendar has been moved. So this really puts stress on the Safrinha planting progress, because the harvested soybeans, they're going to come out late. We know they're going to be coming out late in some areas. And then let's paint I don't know, people aren't really talking about this, but what if instead of going back over dry, that we get into January and it goes over crazy wet across the northern tier of the growing areas? That could happen. Now, all of a sudden, you're talking about, we may be into a discussion where the rains are hampering harvest, pushing the crop counter even further down the road. So I talked to some of my guys in Brazil. Sorry, I'm going on along about this.
You're good.
But talking to my guys in Brazil last week, and you know what they're worried about? They're not so worried about the damage that's been done. They're worried about the potential problems that's going to happen with the late harvest should it get really wet. And then they want to know what's going to happen with the Safrinha crop, which we know has already seen acreage reduction, and there's concern about what the size of it will be. So what's the note for U.S. markets? I think it's wait and see, but I still think that the weather's playing a major role in South America that we can't ignore right now.
I think it's just to echo your points here, Eric. I think it's going to be something where a lot of folks want to keep a close eye on South American weather through the holidays as we flip that calendar over to January, because by the sound of it, we got some hurdles to really get through that could have big impacts, both here, as you alluded to, on the markets, but also just with that crop in general and supplies, et cetera, et cetera. So I think paying close attention to the updated forecast for the next couple of weeks is going to be pretty key, isn't it?
Yeah, I do think that as well. And to be honest with you, I don't know how it all works with the markets and the behavior, but if it's anything like nearly every other industry, it's kind of like, can we just get through the holidays and then
Yep.
January get go, 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 go? And that might be the case, right? It may all of a sudden just this becomes a much bigger story now that the calendar's flipped and we're in a new year.
Very, very true. Well, let's go up to the US. Let's talk about things. Obviously, we don't have a crop in the ground really right now. Well, we do in a few spots, but overall, things are pretty quiet for US farmers here. And with the Christmas holiday coming up, there might be a lot of traveling, etc. How's the weather look in the US here for this week ahead and as we get to the Christmas holiday, Eric?
Well, we got a pretty massive nor'easter running up the East Coast, and I'll tell you something. Had this had some cold air in it, we'd be talking about blizzard up the East Coast, but we don't have that. It's all rain. In fact, parts of South Carolina yesterday picked up some places 6 to 10 inches of rainfall. You may have seen some of the flooding in the news yesterday. But it's what's on the backside of this that's got me intrigued. Now, it's going to be a big flood event for New England, but we're going to see some snow squalls coming out through the eastern Great Lakes, the eastern Corn Belt. So this is where you have convective clouds, like thunderstorm type clouds, that are dropping down snow at an incredible rate. Now, if you're in the midsection of the country, you got to wait till around or just after Christmas for the next chance at moisture to come through. But there's a system I'm watching about a week from now that will be emerging in the southern plains of the United States. It'll make its way toward the Midwest, and it could pack a good punch. I mean, it's a nice look. Meanwhile, Canadian prairie stays dry, but all week this week, California's got a coastal low that's going to slide north to south, delivering rainfall, which is much needed in California. Even though the state is drought free, they need the moisture. It's the wet season for them, so they need to get some of this moisture in place. And it's going to be that system that then ejects into the central United States about a week from now. By the way, that one could also give some rain to Arizona, where they do have some crops in the ground this time of year. So we'll watch it all carefully, but it's going to be a rapidly evolving pattern to finish out the year. Now, the one thing that I can fairly confidently say to you is there's no connection to Arctic air with any of this. So if you get colder air in place, it's temporary. It's not deep. It's not like it's 20, 30 degrees colder than average. And that'll mostly be today across Eastern Corn Belt and then tomorrow over the Southeast. But the mild air, this is crazy. The mild air coming into the Western and high plains and back into the Northern plains, we will see temperatures in Montana that will average warmer than the entire states of Alabama and Georgia and South Carolina in the early part of this week. So 50s in Montana, 40s down in the Southeast. But that'll flip around. It'll change. But if there's one spot that's got a cooler risk to finish the month, it's going to be the Southeast. Subtropical jet lives there right now. So they just have better chances of some cooler weather, clouds, and precip. Central parts of North America, very, very mild, which unfortunately ruins the chances of a widespread white Christmas. Plus, the timing of the next system is all wrong. It's coming after Christmas rather than before.
Well, I hear all of this, and it makes me think about El Nino. And
Yeah.
I guess I'll ask you a final question here today, Eric. Where is El Nino at? Has it plateaued? Are we looking at this continuing into next year? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it'll continue into next year, probably through most of winter, but it has plateaued. We're looking at right now ocean temperatures in the middle of the equatorial Pacific about 1.5 degrees above average, which would be, under what we predicted by about a degree. So it's still a moderately strong El Nino, but it's not a super El Nino by any stretch. So we have to ask: is the weather we've been having typical of El Nino? Mild December, sure, but you got to remember the trend for the last 70 years is for December to get mild. We've been seeing more back half weighted winters. And if El Nino begins to crash, that's what we're going to get this year. We're going to get a back half weighted winter. It's going to come in mid January through maybe early March, just being pretty active with good shots at cold weather, good link up with maybe the polar vortex, which today is living over Greenland. So it's not even close to us, and could really kind of spark things along. But El Nino is projected to crash to neutral conditions by spring, and then we could be talking about a La Nina for next summer. Now, I say that, I can't just drop that bomb at the end of our broadcast here. I have to tell you something real quick. La Ninas, the first year they come in, are not the scary year. Yes, there's risk in the southern plains and the southeast for drought when we have La Ninas that build immediately after El Nino events. But Midwest, upper Midwest history would tell us that we shouldn't fear the brutally dry conditions we can get with a La Nina. So we'll watch that, and you and I will be talking about that all throughout the new year, and we'll certainly have a story going forward.
We definitely will have a story going forward. Well, we do appreciate the time as always. Folks can sign up for your weekly newsletter and check out the latest forecast for their area, ag-wx.com. ag-wx.com. With that, Eric Snodgrass from Nutrien, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you, sir. Thanks for joining us once again this week, and we'll look forward to talking to you in 2024.
Yeah, same to you, Jesse.